Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Give Me the Remote podcast. It is the 16th of June 2018. My name is John and I am joined in the pod by my regular co-host Sheridan.
Hi folks.
Okay Sheridan, what are we talking about today?
Ghost in the Shell, I think first.
Ghost in the Shell, the great cultural appropriation.
Yes, just released on... Was it just released on iTunes?
Recently released on iTunes.
I think it's only $2.99 on iTunes. Quite the little bargain, probably because it was a bit of a box office bomb.
I think it's an incredible bargain at $2.99 because I actually thought it was quite a good movie.
I thought it was an okay movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's doing the whole cyberpunk look, and I mean, it looked enormously like Altered Carbon, which admittedly, actually their pedigree, because both of them come from textual sources, it's a really, everything's ripping off Blade Runner and Neuromancer. It's the whole cyberpunk look.
Yeah.
But it's funny watching two creative things coming from the same pedigree, diverging over 20 years and coming back to a place that the themes are very similar to Altered Carbon, and the look is very, very similar, which I guess is kind of cool. I've got room for more of this in my life.
So basic plot background is Major is a...
Major is a name, not a rank as well, which is a bit confusing.
That is confusing, I agree. Was a person who's been inserted into a perfect robotic humanoid, and spends the movie trying to discover her past and also hunt after an evil villain. That's basically it, isn't it?
With some major twists along the way.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to give those away.
We don't want to give those away. Although I will go so far as to say that in the opening, when the recently resurrected Major gets informed, oh, your family were killed by terrorists, I thought, oh, someone's having a lend of her there. They were just bad. Now we want you to hunt the bad people too. And it turns out that skepticism was well founded, and I guess that's an easy get for a cynic, but still, I don't know, I felt somewhat gratified by having my suspicions confirmed. Yeah, and I mean, the look of this is amazing. The fight scenes are great.
The fight scenes are really good. There was a few times when I mean, with all these kinds of movies, you do have to obviously suspend your belief, but the robotic humanoids seem to have this really cool sort of ability to kind of become semi-invisible through what one can only assume is some sort of complex sort of mirror. Yeah. But they turn up with that technology. They turn up to a fight with a knife. I don't know. I was a bit like, really? We're still doing knives when we're, like, invisible?
Well, guns can be detectable and traceable in funny ways. And, if you're particularly... There's some Japanese culture here. I mean, it's not actually specified if it's set in Japan, is it?
No, it's not.
But there's definitely a real Tokyo look and vibe to it. And the original Ghost in the Shell movie and graphic novels, which I own. It might be the only graphic novels I own, actually. I got them as a Christmas present years ago from my brother.
I don't think that they're obviously set in Japan either, actually.
The movie definitely is.
I
and I think the graphic novels are quite...
Anyway.
Yeah, so... Cultural appropriation, Scarlett Johansson. Scarlett Johansson, I've got to say, she's almost in Al Pacino tearing up the scenery mode in this. Like, the physical ticks that she's pulling are so hard yanks. I mean, obviously she's meant to be a robot, so she's acting a synthetic being and throwing a lot of acting ticks into that. Not helped by the fact half the movie she's sort of a pair of eyebrows being CGI'd onto a plastic shell.
I thought she was a little bit overplayed, the robot mannerisms myself, actually.
Yeah, that's what I meant when I put the Al Pacino character.
But Al Pacino's usually good.
Yeah, but he does chew up the scenery. Some would say he's a little unnecessary in the way he chews up the scenery, and I felt Scarlett might have been pushing there, although at the end of the day it's the director's job to ask for the performance, so I'm not going to be critical there.
Yeah.
Or can a director even direct Scarlett Johansson anymore?
Well, I mean, I think the villain in the movie, Michael Pitt, he kind of and
he's
he
really
also
a villain.
Well, he's also got robotic enhancements, He kind of overplays the physicality as well, so you might be.
But he is meant to be a malfunctioning robot.
That's true, yeah.
And in fact, so is she.
Yeah.
So I guess it asks questions. It mostly answers them. I've got to say, Scarlett Johansson, she keeps doing these roles of science fiction. What is the nature of reality? I'm thinking her. There's been a whole bunch of them. I like it.
I thought it was a bit mediocre. I think it starts off interesting enough. It does look good. I don't think it's really doing anything that original. I thought the anime movies were much more interesting. It pulls out a lot of the themes that were in the anime that were a little bit more complex. So I'm going to give it 3 stars.
I reckon 3.5 I'd probably give it, because I like to do half stars. Sheridan does not. And I think at $2.99 in iTunes, it's a bargain. On the other hand, it's probably going to turn up in Netflix real soon for free. So
that's true. Probably wait till then. Folks.
Yeah, maybe. If you're looking for something to watch, though, you can do far worse. It is pretty, and if you haven't gorged deep in the trough of cyberpunk, then it's going to have some exciting new things for you. So what's next?
Luke Cage, Season 1.
Luke Cage, Season 1. Because Season 2 is about to drop any minute now. In fact, by the time you're listening to this, there's some chance that it might have arrived. I think it's the 22nd of June it's coming out. Which is... Oh, no, it's still about a week away. Hopefully you've diligently listened to our podcast before then. Let's talk about Season 1 of Luke Cage. I think, like too many Marvel Netflix shows, it starts out really strong in the first couple of episodes and then goes to sleep.
Yeah, I think the problem, and I think Jessica Jones suffers from this, and what's the other one with the
Defenders,
the fist,
Iron Fist.
Yeah,
I mean, Iron Fist just completely become here are the travails of a wealthy man with superpowers, and that was dull. I mean, Tony Stark kind of pulls it off because Robert Downey Jr. plays him, but yeah,
they just don't have the plot development or the story arcs for the characters to sustain it throughout the whole series.
Well, it's over 12 hours. An Iron Man movie is only meant to last 90 minutes, and I'd say there's 90 good minutes in Iron Fist. There's just a lot of other minutes that are the other thing. Having
said that, I actually think Luke Cage is by far the best one. The best Marvel Universe Netflix show.
It's pretty good. I'm not sure if it's better than Daredevil Season 1, but I would give you that Daredevil Season 2 dragged it down so badly that... Yep, okay, let's say Luke Cage is so far the best. Mm-hmm.
So Luke Cage was first introduced in the TV Marvel world in Jessica Jones, and the TV show Luke Cage starts, I think, a few months after that.
I thought it was set before that.
No, because he's he's hiding out.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Yep. All right. Let's go with that for continuity.
Yeah.
But it does have a lot of flashbacks.
It does have a lot of flashbacks.
Yeah, that's where I think I was getting confused. Yeah.
In fact, the story is probably 25% flashbacks.
Yes.
I think, which is fun. I mean, it's not an original thing, but you know how it works.
Yeah. I think I'm losing my patience for heavy flashbacks. But so I mean, there's very few white characters.
There is no main character in this show that's white.
I thought there was one villain. Was it
but I wouldn't,
Diamondback?
Not a main character.
Okay, yeah. So it's mostly black people. It talks a lot about, should we say African American culture. It's mostly set in Harlem. I mean, there's a huge portrait of Biggie Smalls dominating half the proceedings, which is cool, even if you're not a huge Biggie fan.
I think it's actually, I mean, it is one of the, I think this is counted as a mainstream TV show. It provides actual real complexity about race in America and politics and corruption and power, and I think it is something that is quite interesting and new that hasn't really been shown that much on TV before.
It is, and also by making it a wholly African American story in which there are African American people of power and privilege and African American people who are villains and heroes, it cuts away the classic thing where white guys are bad, black people are oppressed, which is definitely a story that has some more legs in it.
Yeah.
But it tells a different story about African American people, and that's nice to see every now and then.
Yeah, definitely. Got some really strong female characters.
Well, they're exploring that whole thing about matriarchal society, which there's a question as to whether that's been caused by just the massive incarceration of male African Americans, or whether that's something that goes longer and deeper in their society. But it certainly gives a lot of room for these female strong characters to explore.
Mariah Dillard, who's played by Alfre Woodard, I think is one of the best characters. Plays a powerful female politician who's corrupted. And I think you do genuinely switch between like having empathy for her and liking her and hating her.
I would say. I mean, she's trying to get things done. She's definitely willing to do bad things. She doesn't give a damn about the hero because she doesn't even know who he is. He's a nobody at the start of her story. She thinks it's, every character should think they're the centre of their universe. So there's depth to it. I still, as I do with most of these Marvel hero shows, and I like hero movies, I still fall asleep in the about 3/4 of the way through.
Yeah.
I really struggle to keep interested and to even remember what the hell's happened in that last bit. They're really dragging that act.
The soundtrack in this show is amazing. It's very cool. It's actually like integral to the action. Like it is almost a character in itself. It really brings something to the show. Actually, interesting fact, each episode is named after a Gangstar song, which apparently the producers used to pitch it to Netflix and show the plot development. Apparently, even though they're named after a Gangstar song, it doesn't actually necessarily have anything to do with the lyrics of the song, but the title does have something to do with the name.
One would hope the title does have something to do with the action.
I thought that was pretty cool. I'm a bit of a Gangstar fan, so...
Yeah, I would say even despite my reservations about all the Marvel Netflix shows, laggy third quarter, I would probably give this, 4 stars?
I'm giving it 4 stars.
Yeah, and will we be watching season 2?
Unlike Jessica Jones, to be honest, that show should appeal to me more than any other bloody show on Netflix, probably. Being a kick-ass female with a bit of depth. I really didn't care too much about season 2 when it came out. I wasn't that excited, but I'm looking forward to season 2 of Luke Cage.
Yeah, season 2 of Jessica Jones, which I'm still trudging through, just seems to be a lot of talking about feelings.
It's just a lot of Jessica walking around frowning.
Yeah. And
I don't want to tell her to smile more, but...
She does look good in those jeans, so... I would certainly say Luke Cage season 2. Obviously, it could still disappoint us. I wouldn't have wanted to be tasked with this as a script writing job, because to follow up from, I really felt season 1 almost said everything we need to know about Luke Cage, but maybe they'll find some more things. So that would be good if they do.
Yeah. Cool.
How many stars from you?
4.
4. We're in agreement for once.
We are.
Is it the first time?
No, I think we've agreed. I think we agreed.
Dropped a double 5 somewhere along the way, didn't we? Yeah.
All right, what's next?
Warriors, The Warriors, which is a 1970s film that you bang on about all the time, and it finally...
That's because it's a cult classic and is kind of weird that you'd never watched it.
Anyway, it turned up on Netflix as a freebie last night after we'd watched Ghost in the Shell. And we don't normally do a second movie in an evening, so your love of Warriors was enough to convince you to stay awake, which is quite something, because Sheridan likes to sleep. And 70s movie making's so weird in the modern light of day, because people, once they're paid to see a movie, they would sit through a lot of things that in modern storytelling you just can't get away with.
Oh, sorry, that was my phone. Yeah, that's true. Also, though, I think obviously there's been a lot of changes to technology that make TV cinema watching more interesting that weren't around then. So people didn't really know what they were missing out on because it didn't exist.
Yeah, I thought there was some really funny bits with the movie making. Like, obviously, it was limited by the technology of the day. They would generally cut between single shots of people talking. So they needn't have even all been in the same room together. I assume they were all standing around.
The dialogue and delivery of the dialogue in this movie is pretty bad.
Yeah, well, there are no big names in this at all.
No, there's not actually. I think the biggest name, and I'm forgetting actually what the actor's called, but he played the dad in the TV show Dexter. He was like pretty much the only person I recognised.
Yeah, right. I mean, New York is supposedly full of stage actors who never make the trip to Hollywood, so maybe they made up the numbers. I don't know.
It was an ensemble cast. Like there's not really a standout lead.
I'd say there's not even a protagonist.
So the story is that it's a sort of, I wouldn't say it's a futuristic, it's an alternative viewpoint of America, of New York.
The American gangs in the 1970s, that just looked like...
they were a little bit West Side Storied up, though. Anyway, they're all called to have a meeting of the gangs, and someone tries to sort of lead a revolution and gets... Cyrus gets assassinated, and the warriors, who are one of the gang, get blamed wrongfully for the assassination, and then they've got to make it all the way back to their home on Coney Island, and they basically got to get through all of the other gangs to get home. That's the story. So they kind of come up against different gangs and police and things throughout the evening.
Yeah, I found it really... I mean, because I went through a phase of reading a lot of New York gang books, which were published in the 80s, based around exactly this period. I don't know how realistic they were. I wasn't living in New York at the time myself. But at the same time, all the stuff with crime gangs, I mean, we've got weird little gang wars bubbling away here in sleepy Canberra right now. You've got... the rebels splitting and forming a Comancheros chapter, and they're splitting again, and you've got people beating up Finks in the street.
There's gangs in this show that wear purple sequined vests with purple crocheted beanie hats. They don't look very hard. There's a lot of...
Yeah, there was a lot of weird stuff going on in New York in this period.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, the whole thing of... At the start, Cyrus gets assassinated, so I'm willing to go with that not being a spoiler. There's a hint that the gang that does the assassination are actually FBI informants or infiltrators, and that was a huge thing in protest movements in the late 1970s US. That the number of people who were infiltrators from the government could number as many as a third of the crowd at a rally with 50,000 people, and they would then try and create trouble to discredit the whole movement, and it was... There's a hint of that, and there's a lot of stuff going on like that that's kind of interesting. But
when they have the big gang meet up in the production, they did actually get a lot of real New York gang members there. They also had a lot of undercover cops apparently there to try and make sure that if anything bad happened, they'd be able to stop it.
Oh, right. So they created their own gang gathering and their own infiltrators.
Yeah, well, actually, they also filmed... So, I mean, basically the best thing about this movie is just the sets, which aren't sets. It's actually filmed...
Streets of New York.
In the streets of New York in 1979. So, awesome, graffiti trains and just very cool looking world that's created. But they did actually film it at night from sundown to sunup in real New York. So, and apparently they had like gang members throwing bricks at them and stuff for crew, and actually come against some actual real gangs. But
it's all about who you've hired as your muscle.
Yeah.
There's some really cool stuff in here, like this whole idea of the city being the whole world for these guys, and they don't really understand or are aware of a world beyond their series of patchwork turfs of gangs controlling the drug trade, which is not touched on in this movie, but that's what gangs exist around. drugs, gambling, and prostitution is the trinity of gangs.
Even prostitution's not.
There's a little bit that. I mean, the girl in the pink tops.
She's not a prostitute.
Okay, I thought she was on the game, but
no, I don't think so.
Okay, but the idea that they're not, the trains come and go. They don't know how the trains come and go. They just jump the turnstiles and get on the trains. It moves them around the city. The terrain of the rival gangs is more compelling to them than the physical terrain of the city, which is an interesting idea. And I mean, one of the things is gangs in the 70s could wear colours openly because CCTV hadn't become ubiquitous yet. These days, if you're in a criminal gang wearing your colours, you can't be going to actually do anything criminal. You'll be caught instantly. Yeah. Which is interesting. And
the other difference too is that guns are actually a bit of a precious commodity, and that has wholly changed, obviously, in America.
Yeah.
Even though this is obviously not a real world.
No, but guns were much harder to come by in the 1970s in the US than they are today, when the gun lobby has foisted them on the entire country.
And also, thankfully, hair has changed much since the 1970s.
Yeah, those guys must have spent a lot of time in their day working on that hair.
There's a lot of, some big hair going on.
And it's all quite uniform as well. Like, guys who can frizz it, they've all got their fros, even if they're not African American, and everyone else is going for long curly locks.
Yeah.
The fight scenes are pretty awful.
Well, why?
They're just not well done.
I don't think they're that bad. They're kitschy, but
there's one moment when one of the warriors right at the start, who's suspected of having killed Cyrus, gets surrounded by the big gang that's got hundreds of members, and they sort of bring him down by jumping with their fists around their own faces and hitting them with their elbows. And I've never seen that used as a legitimate fight technique. I guess it does give a lot of protection to your face, and maybe there's a lot of you all doing little elbow taps. Maybe it works to subdue someone, but
until you've been in a large scale gang fight, I don't know if you comment, but yeah, it does seem to be a bit.
Yeah, but for a freebie on Netflix, for a flashback in time to another New York before Donald Trump and his buddies kicked the lower classes out of Manhattan. It's certainly interesting to look at.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's cool. I'm going to give it 3 stars.
Wow, you love it and you think it's cool, and you're only giving it 3 stars.
I like watching it. I would probably watch it again, but the acting's pretty bad and the story's pretty boring and not much to it. But the 3 stars are wholly just to New York in the 70s.
Yeah. Okay. I'll give it 3 stars as well. So what's next?
The Staircase.
Another crime doco.
Yes. So following the story of Michael Peterson, who was charged with murdering his wife. His wife was found. They were at home having dinner, having a chat by the pool.
Valium, bottles of wine.
Yeah, it's what we call upper class evening in white America. So they lived in North Carolina, and he came in to discover his wife at the bottom of their staircase in a pool of blood and called police. And then he was charged with their murder. And so the documentary follows the trial and subsequent retrials and appeals.
Yeah. And I don't honestly, for the life of me, they never explain why the hell the documentary crew got involved when it did and why they stayed on the job for, was it 15 years?
Yeah, so I've got a bit of intel on that, actually, that I was researching this show. Because one of the problems about this series, for me, with a lot of these series, is it goes on a bit too long.
Oh, they could definitely chop this one down to 4 hours, I reckon, with no trouble, and it goes on for 13.
So what I'm about to tell you will probably change your mind. So the documentary was actually released as the first 8 episodes in 2004.
I was aware of that because of something that happens later, but yeah.
And then in 2013 they did another 2 episodes, and then this year they've done another 3 episodes. But because we live down under, we've been geo-blocked from getting the series before this time. So I understand this is the first time the series has actually been available on TV for Australian audiences.
So for us it was saying 3 new episodes, which confused us because we started watching and then there were like way more than 3 episodes.
So for us it looked like this huge 15 episode kind of 13 episode thing, when really it was actually an 8 episode with it. And I think that actually if you were to view it in that way, you'd probably enjoy it more, because the first 8 episodes are actually really good.
There's far too much in general of Michael Peterson staring wistfully into the distance, trying to sound profound. And he's a pretty interesting dude. I mean, he's literally an author of reasonably well-selling books, I understand.
Yeah, Vietnam War vet.
Yeah, and, you know, that with his bisexuality and some of the other strange things that have happened in his life.
Comes out pretty early, which I think is okay as a spoiler. So it comes out pretty early that Michael Peterson is bisexual, and how much his wife did or didn't know about his bisexuality is a bit of a mystery, but it becomes a major part of the trial, which in 2002 in North Carolina in the US would probably have been a pretty big deal, and it's sort of put forward as a possible motive for him killing her.
Yeah, I mean, I did not like the prosecutors in this at all. I would really hate to ever be prosecuted by them.
That woman prosecutor, I think her name's Frida Black. She's scary.
Yeah, but just the way she was willing to paint any deviation from her view of a normal life as a sign of evil. And you know, my God, he likes wearing pink slacks. He must be guilty of murder. That's not something she says, but that's the kind of logical leaps that she keeps throwing at the jury, and it appears to have been a jury that was willing to buy that kind of thinking, hook, line and sinker, and I found that disturbing.
So yeah, it's not clear from the documentary why the documentary makers are there. They rarely break the fourth wall with them, so you do kind of forget that they are documentary.
And we have complained about another documentary, Evil Genius, where the fourth wall gets just smashed all over, and we didn't like that either.
Yeah. I'm not complaining about it, but so basically, I understand it because it was done by a French filmmaker. They wanted to just make a documentary about the US justice system. And that is actually one of the more interesting aspects of especially the first part of this documentary. And
where money is no object, just how much money can you spend? And Peterson appears to have spent millions of dollars.
Well, they do talk about the figures that they're spending at various times. I think they were talking in the first one, at one point he talks about getting through the pre-trial component at $400,000 US in 2002. It's a lot of money. Yeah. And he's quite acknowledges that, you know, he is getting a different kind of justice to what other people get in the US justice system.
The idea of focus grouping juries, I mean, both of us, you more than me, have worked in courtrooms, and that just blew my mind. I'm like, oh, wow.
Watching how they actually compile their defence is really, really interesting. And apparently what they had to do, because the lawyer, his name's David Rudolph, was really hesitant at letting the documentary makers in there, because he's like, well, what about lawyer-client privilege? If you guys are in here, it's being waived.
Must have waived that. Yeah.
No. Apparently, what they did was they hired the documentary makers as employees and made an agreement that every day they would send the tapes by FedEx to Paris. Yeah. So there would be no copy of it in the US jurisdiction.
Oh, that could be subpoenaed.
And apparently the prosecution did try and access it, but ultimately just resisted it, I think, because it was too difficult. So that's an interesting sort of component about it, because the access that these documentary filmmakers do have, I mean, not just to the family, which I think is actually sort of the least interesting part, but to the defence team is just incredible. I've never seen anything like that before.
Yeah, the intellectual rigour of their internal discussions in terms of can we prove this, can we get a jury to believe this, was something I don't think I've ever seen in any professional environment I've been in. That degree of asking questions of themselves.
Well, just the size of the team is phenomenal.
Yeah, and you guarantee none of those people are working for $20 an hour.
No. And also, I mean, another great thing about the American judicial system for us as TV viewers is obviously that there's video allowed in their courtrooms. So you have this awesome behind-the-scenes preparation for the hearing, seeing the hearing unfold, the interviews down in the, bail, sort of jail area when Michael's coming out and all that kind of thing is great. I mean, it's unprecedented access, I think. I've not seen it before like that.
Yeah, it really is something, and I think we are actually missing out enormously in Australia in terms of understanding our justice system and access to justice in not allowing cameras. I totally get that back in the day when the cameras had to have blaring lights, that it was an unreasonable intrusion. But having said that, there are so many things wrong with the American justice system.
I'm not saying...
Which this show really explores. And we've seen this in a few show now, particularly Making a Murderer, where the so-called laboratories where forensic evidence gets sent, they're not laboratories in any scientific sense of the word. They really, the people working it feel like they're part of the team trying to get the result. And you can't do anything approaching science with that kind of attitude. I feel that this is unearthing what probably exists everywhere, because fundamentally these guys work in the team and they're part of the team and they're going for drinks after work with the team, and it's not on anyone's agenda to fix this, but it'd be nice if they could get some more arm's length where all they're trying to do is provide an analysis with no knowledge of what the analysis means in its context.
Yeah. I think obviously the negative with the access is it's a very biased documentary.
Well, we're not seeing all million hours of recording. We're only seeing what the producers chosen or the editors chosen to
Yeah, well,
present.
actually, interesting that you say that, because I was reading... I was trying to find out what was missing from this documentary, because I really got into Making a Murderer, and which is another Netflix original true crime that I think probably most people have probably seen by now. Great documentary. But when you actually go and see what's missing, there's a crap ton of evidence that they didn't put in there that probably indicates that he was guilty. Now, in that case, I'm not saying that he should have gone to jail, because there were so many problems with the police investigation. But, I mean, I think the theory was that he was very clearly guilty and the police did some dodgy things so that they could ensure that he went to jail. Now, that is wrong and should never happen. But the filmmakers did leave out a lot of very damning evidence from that documentary that I think was quite misleading, actually. So I was researching this to see what was missing. And apparently he had a relationship with the editor of this documentary. Now, no one seems to be able to say whether they actually ended up having a sexual relationship, because he was in jail for most of the time. But apparently...
he was in jail for 8 years in the middle of a 15-year journey.
So apparently the female editor fell in love with him, and the director of the documentary acknowledged that she was in love with him, and she would fly back to North Carolina every 2 or 3 months and visit him in prison.
Yeah, so that's a bit of fourth wall they probably could have knocked down for our
exactly.
benefit. Yeah.
I thought that was a bit... But having said that, there doesn't appear to be any real evidence missing. One thing that they do miss out, and when this show first started, I think I remember saying to you, "Oh, this is that owl case," because I had listened to a podcast a long time ago about this theory that this woman who'd fallen down a staircase had actually been killed by an owl.
Or disturbed so that she'd fallen down the staircase due to the owl.
Yeah, an owl attacking her.
But talons making marks on the skull and things.
But they don't mention it in this documentary, and I thought, I must have got it confused, but it is that case. Right. And there is...
So the owl, what done it?
apparently there's some strong evidence that, well, there is some evidence, I wouldn't say strong, that they found pieces of wood and feathers in her hair.
Right.
That, I mean, that apparently is in the prosecution and defence evidence that material was there and is unexplained. And the thought is that some sort of, this must be a special type of killer owl that they have in North Carolina, which is known to attack people.
It was a very steep staircase, and I have fallen down a staircase when I was very young, and it's one of the earliest memories I've got. It is terrifying when you fall down a staircase.
But I think the problem with the staircase theory is, how do you explain the location of the...
Well, if it was an owl getting its talons in it.
Exactly. See, that's why people say the owl theory is got some legs. Or wings. But they don't talk about the owl theory. And so, but other than that, there wasn't a whole lot that they left out of the evidence. So
one thing they did, which I've never seen, was actually the closing scenes interviewing the trial judge. And I won't give it away, but
that was
getting his views on what had happened, because it was a jury trial, but the trial judge was presiding over it and giving his view in law. And I've never seen that before. I really felt that actually gave a great deal of closure in terms of resolving my mind.
Yeah. Apparently they did have an agreement with the prosecution early on to film, and they did film with them for about 2 months.
The start of the thing, there's much more from the prosecution side, and then as it goes on...
Apparently the prosecution said, no, sorry, you got to pack up, we don't want you here anymore.
Yeah, right.
So they had intended it in the beginning to be quite, both sides.
Although once you start shagging the defendant, that's probably going to colour the prosecution.
Yeah, once the editor starts, a deep, years-long love affair. But I thought it was one of the better true crime documentaries I've seen for a while. Certainly the first 8 episodes are very strong.
First 6 episodes, but yeah, the early stuff more so. I mean, you could probably just skip, if you ran it on fast forward when anywhere Michael's looking wistfully into the distance. You could knock this over with a great, probably spare 5 hours and watch a much tighter production.
And there are actually a lot more twists than what we've revealed here, but we don't want to take them away from you guys, because that's kind of what makes it interesting.
We want you to enjoy it.
There's some real corkers in there, actually, that you're just like, what? There's no way he did it / did not do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I reckon it's a 3.5 for me.
I'm gonna go 4 stars.
4 stars, just because you love anything with courts.
I loved the trial preparation stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was something really different.
Well, if you're rich enough, you can just practice in a real courtroom.
Well, actually, I liked that they were very self-aware and acknowledging of that.
No, that was good. I mean, look, Michael Peterson seems, he probably would have been. He definitely would have been delightful company at a dinner party.
True. Sometimes I do think some of the jokes they make, though, are going in maybe a bit towards the O.J. Simpson kind of territory. They obviously have a quirky sense of humour as a family, but there's a few jokes about the mother. I'm like, I don't know if that's cool.
An intelligent family are going to have a black sense of humour about some of those sorts of things. I did also think it was really striking just how much his kids loved him. I mean, that was amazing.
That's true. All of the children except for the mother's daughter, who was not
his child. Yeah,
stuck by him
in an amazing way.
Yeah, against some,
pretty
especially for some of the kids, there was some very difficult. Yeah, they could have easily and very justifiably turned against him.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a really interesting story, I guess, is what we're saying. And if you like Netflix crime docos with lots and lots and lots of documentary footage, it's another one to watch.
Definitely.
Okay, so this is the end of the podcast. We'd like to thank you all for listening all this way through. If you're enjoying the Give Me the Remote podcast, we would love it if you could share it with your friends. And also, we're still waiting for our first fan emails, so gmtrpodcast@gmail.com. Send them in. Let us know what shows you want us to review, or just, give us a little shout-out. We'll read out the first 5 on air as the standing offer. And other than that, be sure to subscribe if you've enjoyed it.
Thanks, folks.